It's 5 o'clock Friday afternoon, and you know what that means, gang. It's time for the WhiskyCast Happy Hour Webcast. I'm Mark Gillespie in the WhiskyCast studio in New Jersey, and hope it's been a great week for you. And we will have a great panel coming up here in the next few minutes or so. We'll be joined in a few minutes by Dave Broom, the award-winning whiskey writer, also Noah Rothbaum and David Wondrich, who do the Life Behind Bars podcast for the Daily Beast, will be with us and have both won numerous awards for books in their own right. Johanne McInnis, the Whisky Lassie, will be with us, and we will also talk in a few minutes here with Nichole Olenek. She is the leader of the Whisky Belles, whiskey club in Edmonton, Alberta, that is our current reigning Whiskey Club of the Month. Before we bring Nichole in, though, I do want to give you a couple of quick updates from this afternoon. A lot of news out of Kentucky today regarding events that were scheduled for this fall, but that are already now, even 3 and 4 months out, being postponed because of the coronavirus pandemic. We got word this afternoon that not only is the Kentucky Distillers Association canceling this year's Kentucky Bourbon Affair, which had been moved from June in previous years to September for the first time this year. But at 3 o'clock this afternoon, just a couple of hours ago, Danny Wimmer Presents, the promoter behind Bourbon and Beyond, the Hometown Rising Country Music and Bourbon Festival, and the Louder Than Life Rock Festival that all take place over 3 consecutive weekends in Louisville. They announced today that all 3 events are canceled for this year because of the pandemic. They did not want to have to try to make arrangements and plan ahead for large crowds and gatherings. And with a number of musicians and rock bands canceling their tour plans for this year because of the pandemic, they made the decision that it was safer and smarter to go ahead and pull the plug now. Now, the question remains, what does that mean for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival? I spoke just in the last half hour or so with Randy Prasa, the new executive director and president of the Bourbon Festival. We'll have that interview on WhiskyCast this weekend. As of now, they are still planning to go ahead, but they do have a board meeting on Monday. Their belief is that they may well fit into this narrow window of time between the end of the summer and the start of the cold and flu season later in the fall, where they might be able to actually have at least small-scale events in the Bardstown area. But no decision has been made on the progress or the status of the Bourbon Festival yet. Now, I want to bring in Nichole Olenek because Nichole is the leader of the Whisky Belles in Edmonton, Alberta. And welcome, Nichole. You are the reigning Whiskey Club of the Month. Tell us about the Whisky Belles, first of all.
Whisky Belles started as 3 women who love whiskey and wanted to find something different. We wanted to find a different environment instead of our standard tastings and do things a little outside of the box. So we sat down one afternoon, created the club, and have gone off on our own little exploration of whiskey on our own. And it's been kind of fun and kind of wild.
How many members do you have? I know you've got folks spread out around Alberta and a few that have moved to other provinces as well, right?
Yes. So there's the core group of the 3 of us that started the Belles, Eva in BC, Sheila and myself here in Edmonton. And we've accumulated more people. We have about a dozen now who we call the Belles. And it is not just a women's club. It is women, men. It's an open club. And we wanted an environment that was really open online and in person and just encourage people to have fun when they drink whiskey and not be so stuffy about it and not be caught up in some of the traditions about it. Respect it, but also enjoy it.
And one of the things that we've done over the years is raise a lot of money for charities in the Edmonton area. I want you to talk about those quilts behind you. Out of distillery t-shirts.
Yeah, so because we like thinking outside the box, we thought, let's do something different to raise money for our charity of choice here in Edmonton, which is E4C Alberta. And the idea came that let's make a t-shirt quilt. I'm a quilter with my mom, and we've made t-shirt quilts before for friends who collected t-shirts from music festivals. Thought, let's do this and create it for the whiskey community and raffle it off so we raise money for our charity. So we reached out to our brand ambassadors, local reps, distilleries, to yourself, and just said, hey, we're looking for t-shirts. Please send us what you can. It's a donation, and we're going to put it together and make a t-shirt quilt. So we have one behind me that is completed, and then we have a second one here in partial completion. And we've got t-shirts from all over North American as well. We have some UK t-shirts, and we did get one from South Africa as well, 3 ships. So really cool how the community has responded to support it.
And would have gladly helped you, but we don't have any t-shirts available. So I didn't have anything made up that we could send you, but we were able to at least put the word out and help you get a few shirts. And tell us what E4C does, because it really is a broad-based charity within the Edmonton area, right?
It is. It started about 50 years ago with 4 faith leaders in the community who came together, and they were looking at the issues around poverty within the community and said, you know what, let's pool our resources and see what we can do for the community. And that has just grown. So they're addressing the issue of poverty, looking at food security, housing, getting people involved in the community, and also getting them skilled up to go back to the workforce if they left it, or to enter the workforce if they've never been there. So right now they have about 20 separate programs that they run with over 300 people employed, and they serve up to 14,000 people in a year. So just an amazing charity, and what they do for the community as a whole to address that poverty issue and fight it head on.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Nichole. I'm going to have you stick around because one of the benefits of being a Whiskey Club of the Month leader is we're going to have you stick around for the entire hour so you get to throw some comments in and ask some questions of our panel and be part of
Awesome, thank you.
Well, so we want to have you take part in this. And if you have comments or anything you'd like to ask, or even just saying hello to folks, don't forget about the chat windows or adding comments on the Facebook page, because we do see them. And we can throw them up on screen. Same thing with Periscope. If you're watching us on Twitter and you respond with a comment on Twitter, we will not see it until after the show. So just keep in mind, you might want to switch over to Periscope for that one. But we can now bring in the rest of the panel, and this is going to be fun. Let's just punch the buttons here and get everybody in the room. So we have
all right.
The top right corner, Dave Broom, safely back from New Zealand and Australia, at home in the UK right now, and somebody's playing bongo drums or something in the background there.
It's not me.
Okay. The bottom row, starting from the left, Johanne McInnis, the Whisky Lassie, joining us from St. John, New Brunswick. Noah Rothbaum and David Wondrich, great authors in their own right, and podcasters now as well. They host the Life Behind Bars podcast through the Daily Beast that you can hear on most of your favorite podcast apps as well. Guys, how is everybody today?
Good. Good. Yeah, I'm considerably further ahead. It's almost bedtime here. So you're having an early evening drink. I'm having my final dram. So yeah, it's good. The weather's great.
And speaking of that, Dave, what's in your glass?
Sorry.
What is in your glass, Dave?
What's in my glass? A glass of this kind of really weird Japanese hibiki, which is a Cask-Strength hibiki 17-year-old that I found lurking.
Fancy.
Yeah, I'm with illustrious company. I figured an illustrious dram was necessary.
Nichole, what's in your glass?
I have a Glenmorangie 10-year-old.
Ooh, okay. What do you think of it?
It's been lovely. We found a whole bunch of these kicking around on shelves here. It's become a daily dram for a lot of us. So it's been just a nice, hate to say it, but refreshing whiskey to have at any time.
Noah, what's in your glass?
Well, I had an idea before Broom dropped like his hibiki, rare hibiki, and now I'm like, maybe I should pick something even rarer. But do I crack a bottle just to impress Broom, or do I just drink what I'm going to drink? It's a little. I was going to drink the Widow Jane 10-year-old, which I had opened for to make some cocktails the other night for drinks. So maybe I'll do this. And then I do have a small bottle of the Hibiki 21 in my other stash, which I see you're 17 and I raise you, Broom.
David, what's in your glass?
I have, if you could see the age statement on this thing, this is the Rittenhouse 10-year-old rye from 20 years ago or so. And it's my last bottle, but I've got a dram, and man, is it good. This is just a killer rye.
Glass.
If memory serves me right, you were the man to bring Rittenhouse rye to New York. Is that from the initial palate, or?
This is all right. This is a funny story. I'll be quick. I called them up from Esquire in about 2002 and said, "I hear you've got this Rittenhouse rye. Can you send me some?" And Larry Cass, the press person, called down to the shipping room, and I get these bottles a couple days later, and I look at them and I call Larry and I say, "Larry, how are you selling 10-year-old whiskey for $14.99 a bottle?" And he says, "What do you mean 10 years old?" And I said, "Well, there's a band right on the bottle." And he said, this is stuff specifically for La Maison de Whisky. And in fact, it's a 700 milliliter bottle and everything. And the shipping guys were like, "Esquire magazine, we don't want to send them the regular stuff. Let's send them the good stuff."
Joanne, what's in your glass?
I'm going to confess to being a bit of a fangirl this evening. When I saw that Dave Wondrich was going to be on the panel, I literally squealed like I was ready to meet Justin Bieber. Sorry. So in your honor, I made myself a rusty nail this evening.
Oh, good for you.
Thank you.
That sounds great.
David, you were talking about the rusty nail yesterday on your Twitter feed. The lo-fi lush thing? We'll talk about that in a few minutes, right?
Okay, yeah.
And just for the record, what I have in my glass, I pulled a dusty bottle of Glenrothes 1985 off the shelf.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, my heart.
So I've still got about half of this one left, but we got to think about getting Ronnie Cox on.
That's one of my favorite whiskeys there is.
This is the editor's cask, which I went to Scotland to pick, and has, if you look closely, my own signature on it, which is pretty cool.
Go off.
You're just doing one-upmanship.
I'm jealous, Noah. I never got to do that, but that's okay.
That was a lot of fun.
Now, we do have a quick question from our buddy Andy Watts in South Africa at the James Sedgwick Distillery and Distill. And this is for Nichole. He wants to know, Nichole, did you use the James Sedgwick Distillery shirt that they sent up? And I think that was on the first quilt that's already been auctioned off, right?
Yes, it was on the first quilt and it was auctioned off, so it's gone to a good home and we were happy to use it. So thank you very much, Andy.
Okay, let's see. And well, we just answered Angelo's question, what's in everyone's glass? Let's see. So you guys heard me talking at the beginning about the cancellations in Kentucky. And it sort of brings up the point, I think, because Dave and I were together in Christchurch, New Zealand a few weeks ago for Dramfest. That may just well have been the last big whiskey festival for a while. I think the way things are going with this.
Yeah.
First of all, Dave, tell us about your exploits getting back.
How long have we gone?
These posts on Facebook about you going over to Australia and then getting exposed somehow to COVID-19 at an Amber Light showing, and all hell breaking loose from there. So
basically, I was in Australia for a few days doing some work, and we did a screening of the Amber Light there, which ironically was sponsored by Fever Tree, because after Dramfest had finished, my wife and daughter were with me. We were having a wee holiday afterwards, but on the day that the holiday started, I got this letter from the Australian Health Authority saying somebody who'd been at the screening had come down with corona, and I had to go immediately into 14 days of isolation. So my holiday lasted for 6 hours. And then, it was just kind of catalogue of disasters, really. We tried to get home, and we were going back via Australia, but the Australians closed their borders, so we couldn't transit through Australia. So we had to buy another ticket, which was going via Hong Kong, and we got to Auckland, and the day we got to Auckland, Hong Kong closed its borders, and New Zealand went into a really very sensible, very severe lockdown the day after. So we headed back to Christchurch and hunkered down in Christchurch for the rest of the holidays. So my family hate me, basically. And we've finally managed to get back before commercial flights finished. Because we're in Christchurch, we couldn't actually fly back for everything was going from Auckland. But we're back and we're safe. And in some ways, I would rather be in New Zealand, for it's considerably safer and more organized in the UK. But it's nice to be home.
And you wrote a beautiful piece about the whole experience for the Daily Beast, so you can find out more info on Dave's journey there. I didn't think that you'd ever get back, so I'm glad that you're here.
We were wondering. I must admit, I was kind of prepared for the long haul, and then the news came that Qatar Airways were stopping the commercial flights, and it was we possibly wouldn't get back till the middle of June, and at that point we went, we need to go, really, So we're back, but we're healthy.
Yeah.
And just one quick note from a listener or viewer, Spike McClure, our old friend. Lordy,
Hey.
what a beard. Did you lose your voice or run out of shaving cream down there or what?
No, I just I kind of we had like 2 days where holiday was possible, and we went to Hobbiton to the set of the Hobbit, which is amazing. And I think there I just decided to kind of go the full Gandalf, really. So I'm just kind of, this is growing until all of this finishes. I always swore there, but
We'll work on getting you a hat.
And a walking stick.
And Christoph Kolderak says, hello, Dave. I'll be watching the Amber Light this weekend for the first time.
Oh, excellent. Well, I hope you enjoy it, Christoph. Hope you enjoy it.
And so let's talk about this now. At what point do you think we might actually start being able to get together again? If it even, I'm beginning to think now we might as well just forget about the rest of this year.
Yeah,
I
probably.
think that's realistic. Yeah.
Unless we find some kind of vaccine. I mean, that's, to be honest, I think.
Yeah.
And the vaccine, I think they're saying next fall or something, a year from now, basically, less than a year. So, I mean, Tales of the Cocktail is also, the mayor of New Orleans, the governor of Louisiana has said no more festivals this year, which, I mean, that's everything to New Orleans.
Yeah.
So if New Orleans is saying no more festivals, I think basically the rest of the country and probably the world, we're not going to see any more, at least in person, maybe online, but not in person.
Yeah, I can't see anything major taking place this year at all. I was speaking to the guys in Isle. I mean, obviously the Fish is cancelled this year. But speaking to the guys up there, and there's going to be kind of alternative online Fish running. And I think, that's essentially how a lot of stuff is going to keep going over the next year. So that's the reality, And it's sensible, it's pointless suddenly going, ooh, all of a sudden, we've flattened the curve or whatever, and nobody can go out and catch it. That seems a bit daft.
Joanne, your thoughts, because you're being kind of quiet down there in the corner.
Yeah. My day job gives me a lot of inside information, which I'm not really privy to talk too much about, but I can tell you that from a Canadian perspective, you probably won't see any type of large gatherings until January 2021.
Which
realistically
means the first event we might be able to have is Victoria in January, if we're lucky.
If you're lucky,
If we're lucky. But I know Fredericton, where you and I usually get together in November for the New Brunswick Spirits Festival, this was going to be their 25th anniversary event this year, and I'm betting that's not going to happen.
We got word today in our province that they're recommending no large gatherings anywhere in New Brunswick until at least December of this year, with the possibility of reevaluations. We're one of the first provinces that's actually phasing into what they call normalcy. It's a 4-phase approach. And so that started today. We got news as to how we're going to slowly start to recover and try to somewhat be normal. So it's good news where I live.
And I saw a tweet you posted earlier today on Twitter that no cases for the last 3 or 4 days now, no new cases?
5 days straight.
Wow.
No deaths in our province, knock
That's
on wood,
wonderful.
and only one case remaining in ICU. So we are very much planking the curve here in our little province.
Great.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Well, that gives us hope.
So let's talk about the future. Dave, you mentioned the virtual phase that's going to happen in May, and we're seeing all sorts of virtual events popping up. Our friend Becky Paskin is starting the Our Whiskey Festival this coming week.
Yeah.
Is this the way things are going to head now? Are we going to start seeing more virtual events replacing the physical events even after we get a vaccine and get sort of through this over the next year? Is it more logical?
Yeah. Will this become the norm? It was kind of something that I maybe touched on in that piece I did for Noah, which is, the whiskey industry is based around community, and it's based around human contact. It's the fact you can go to a festival and meet the distiller and meet the blenders and actually have a face-to-face conversation, look into people's eyes. So this is kind of really weird. It's important, and we have to do it, and we got to keep doing it. But I sincerely hope this won't become the norm. But I think some refined version of this will become more normal, or will become standard for a considerable amount of time, I'm afraid to say. And I think companies, I've got no insight into this, but I suspect companies are desperately trying to find ways of getting samples out to as many people as possible to try and continue to educate folk. But yeah, it's not going to be easy. I don't know what you guys think.
I think there are probably a bunch of people in some of the corporations who are looking at how their enormous travel budgets suddenly went to zero and thinking, this might, if people will tolerate this, there might be more of this in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I would agree with that. And, I was thinking, the last time I saw some of you, we're all in Ireland or in America or whatever. And, do companies really need to fly people halfway around the world just to launch a bottle of whiskey?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
I'm like, Broom. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I almost cut that section out of your article, but I was like, you know what? Like, it felt so heartfelt, but I'm thinking, Dave, what are you doing to us, man? Like, what? Like, duh, we all have to go all the time. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I've seen the same. My following up on that, answering my question, saying yes, it is necessary. I think what the companies then have to address is it can't just be the launch of a new whiskey. It has to be something else. There has to be a story. It has to be bigger. It has to be more immersive.
Yeah.
People have got to get something more out of it rather than just a nice party for one evening and then everybody goes back home. So I think from a company's point of view, they have to justify the expense, and also, are people just going to be more nervous about traveling? Do we all really want to continue to just fly around the world without care? Or
yes,
in
the back of our mind, are we kind of going, oh, hang on, maybe I should go there?
Well, what I could see that happening here is that, for instance, the guys that we had on Wednesday, guys like Alan Winchester and Adam Hannett and Andy Watts, I can see those guys doing, instead of being on the road at least 1 week a month, I can see them doing more virtual stuff and then having the regional ambassadors hosting events, but bringing in the stars of the show virtually, because you can set up a nice little video conferencing setup or the cost of one plane ticket over round trip between Europe and the U.S.
Absolutely.
I hope it doesn't come to that, to be honest. I think you're right, Mark. I don't know, Dave, obviously I agree with you, but I would love for us to go back to the way it was, like tomorrow, and jet off to, we're supposed to go to Scotland in June and, Ireland, and all these. It's that terrible feeling as these dates come in our calendars and we're like, oh yeah, I was supposed to be, I think this week I was supposed to be down in Mexico doing something for Earth Day. And it's like, I can't wait to get back to that point. And obviously, it's going to be a while. And I think, between now and then, look, we've seen, things like people are getting a lot more comfortable with delivery services. They're getting more comfortable with takeout cocktails, where the laws are changing in a lot of places in America to allow distilleries to sell directly to consumers, and ship to them. So, I mean, some of these things will be long-lasting effects that will be, I think, maybe ultimately good, in some ways. And then at some point, hopefully in the near future, we all are able to get on planes and reconvene in amazing destinations and see our friends all over the world again.
Yeah, Stephen Bronner points out, I'd rather be in Limburg tonight than looking at my PC, even with you guys on.
Absolutely.
Would have been the
100%. 100% speaks the truth.
I will say, on the other hand, though, some of the trips, thinking back on some of the trips I've taken over the last year, it's like flying to Portland, Oregon from New York.
I'm sorry, Dave. You're breaking up. We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Dave. Like friends, family members are listening to this, Dave. We don't need to get into this right now.
Well, I think it's what's that?
Should I mute Noah so you can finish this story?
I'll mute him later.
I think from my perspective, as a person who mostly travels for pleasure and for going to festivals and meeting up with people that I've met on social media, I can't imagine us not going back to that again. Like, it's just too much of an important part of who we are as whiskey enthusiasts and people from the industry. I mean, there's just nothing better than getting on the ferry to go to Islay and arriving with Port Ellen, the maltings going in the background, and you see Bruichladdich, and there's nothing better than getting a hug from Mary at Bruichladdich, or running into Martine Nuet, in the little market, or having a pizza with Stephen Bronner in a church. Like, there's nothing that's ever going to replace that for me as a social person. And I've met so many people from all over the world. When I go to Scotland or Kentucky or wherever I end up as a whiskey enthusiast. And I can honestly say, nothing against vodka. I'm going to quote Fred Minnick, vodka sucks. You don't do that for vodka. At least I don't know anybody that travels for vodka.
I have. I was, put it this way. I was shooting submachine guns in the basement of the security police headquarters in Kyrgyzstan on a vodka trip. I was happy.
Here's to that.
So, what the people who drink vodka drink a lot of vodka.
We have a great comment from Bazi Karasu. Festivals are not only for visitors and traveling folks, they're incredibly important for the local economy, the shops, the restaurants, the hotels, you name it. I'd like to see the festivals going back on track, but focusing more to local distilleries and bottlers instead. Is this where we might have some more regional events and smaller regional events?
Conceivably. I mean, there was an interesting report out yesterday from the IWSC, sort of looking at the trends that have taken place, and the big brands are benefiting hugely. People seem to be going into reassurance. And the smaller brands with less distribution and higher price, etc., are suffering. And I think a lot of smaller distillers and a lot of smaller brands are liable to suffer in the short and perhaps medium term. So, I mean, to get smaller local festivals once everything opens up would be a fantastic idea, I think. And that's not knocking big brands in any way whatsoever, but. I think the smaller guys really do need support at this point.
Nichole, I want to bring you into this because you've been sitting up there quiet for a minute. Tell us what you think, because you get this from the consumer point of view, because you get the Edmonton MS Whiskey Festival in January, right before Victoria, and a few of the local events. But what would it mean to you as a whiskey consumer to not have as many festivals and opportunities to go out and connect with people?
I think the technology is good to a point, but You really do need that in person. There's something about being in front of somebody who's pouring and telling you a story, and it's that shared environment, that shared moment that is so different in person than it is virtually. Virtually is great, but it's that in person that just, it latches onto your heart and you're like, I love this whiskey now. You have this memory. And it goes to what Davin says in his book. We drink whiskey and we remember whiskey because of the memories that we associate it with. These festivals, these tours, these communities that we all love to go visit, it's part of whiskey drinking for us as community. I can't see not doing it. It just may be a longer period before we get to do it again.
And I think that plays into perfectly with something, Johanne, that you've been talking about for several years now, the whiskey fabric.
Yeah, I still believe in it. It's some people will make fun of us and say that we're sniffing whiskey fabric softener, but I still believe in it. I think, like I say, I have met some amazing people. There isn't anything about it that I don't like. If I want to talk to Andy Watt, I pick up Twitter and I go on a personal message and I ask him a question, or I can walk up to you at a festival. I can say hi to Nichole, virtually. It's awesome. I'm watching some of the comments come up, and it's all people that I've either met somehow face to face or online, and it's a warming feeling. It truly is a fabric, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think that's one of the positives that's come out of all of this, which is a realization that we are part of a community and we are connected. And I think the important thing moving forward is that we retain all of that, and we don't start forgetting about it. I think it's proved how interconnected everything is. So we've got to keep this community strong. We've got to help the bartenders. We've got to help bar owners. We've got to help distillers get through all of this. And you're absolutely right, John. It's part of the fabric, and we've helped to weave the fabric, and we've got to make sure it doesn't get frayed, if I may extend the metaphor a little too far.
Cheers to that.
Yep.
I'm probably going to be drinking a lot if we keep doing this.
So here's a question from one of our listeners. Law School Drunk asks, for you five, tell us the story of your first ever taste or dram of whiskey. And Dave Broom, I think you sort of addressed this in the Amber Light a little bit.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell us about the five of you, your first ever experience with whiskey where you actually realized this is something more than just a way to just drink. This is something I could learn to make this part of my life.
Yeah, do you want me to kick off? The first kind of light bulb moment for me was in the back of a car with a friend heading to a ceilidh, a dance in the far north of Scotland. We were behind in terms of the drinking because everybody else was actually already in Ullapool at that particular moment. And my mate Les grabbed a bottle of Talisker. This shows how old I am, for it was Talisker 8-year-old 100 proof. And the two of us sat in the back seat of the car and drank a substantial amount of this Talisker 8-year-old. And it was actually at that point, I remember looking out of the window of the car and looking at the landscape and realizing that this whiskey somehow was part of what I was traveling through. And that was the spark that made me kind of fall in love with whiskey. Yeah, that was it.
Dave Wondrich. Dave, go ahead. Dave, are you hearing us?
Me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. No, my connection's a little wobbly. So, well, my first, I probably swilled a little bit of Jack Daniels and Jim Beam before that. But my first real experience with whiskey, with like actually sitting down and tasting whiskey, was in the mid 70s when my parents had a friend who liked to come over and sit with them, and he drank this strange stuff called single malt whiskey, and it was a Lefroy that he drank, and this was very rare at the time. Nobody had, there were like 4 single malts in the American market, and that was one of them. And I got a taste of that, and that was at first I was probably 14, 15, What the hell is this? This is like nothing I've ever tasted in my life. It's like, I'd been a Boy Scout. I'd built a lot of campfires. I knew how to rub sticks together. And this was just like liquid rubbing sticks together. I wanted to be out in the winter. I wanted to be out in the snow. And it was just so invigorating and cool. And so that was, I started sort of in the deep end of the pool, the whiskey pool, at least at the time. I mean, of the whiskeys you could buy, that was by far the weirdest one. But it really kind of gave me a taste. And after that, I just laughed at Scotch whiskey. It's like, oh, Johnny Walker Black, you think that's harsh? You know nothing about whiskey, my friend. I would tell my my little friends as we were sitting around getting high.
Nichole.
I grew up in a unique household. My mom drank bourbon, my dad drank Scotch, so it was always there. So when I was mid-teens, I would ask for a drink, and it was like, this is something I really like. This wasn't wine, this wasn't sweet, this wasn't fruity, and I was intrigued by it, and my exploration has just taken off since then.
Johanne.
My mom is watching, so I have to be careful what I say.
I think the statute of limitations has expired, Johanne.
She thinks I'm such a good girl. I'll talk about my first Scotch. How about I'll do that? And that didn't happen until I was almost in my late 30s, and it was my ex-father-in-law who thought it would be a good idea to introduce me to Ardbeg 17 as my first Scotch.
Wow, there you go.
So I was
Yeah.
I don't want to say hazed by any means, but I had never had anything like it before, and likely will never have anything like it again. It was an eye-opening experience for sure. I kind of made a few funny faces, and he got a good chuckle out of it. And I'd like to think it was a test to see if I'd be a good daughter-in-law. So I'm good. It was a good
Your ex-father.
my ex-father-in-law.
Yeah.
Noah.
I mean, I can tell you the first time that I really remember drinking whiskey, but I didn't like it. I was at a party, probably, if the statute of limitations has expired, probably late into high school at a kid. He would have parties. I think both of his parents were shrinks. They were psychiatrists or psychologists, and he would have a party in their office. I remember he made me a drink. It was like a pint glass, and it was probably 3/4 Jack Daniels, 1/4 Coke. And I thought, oh, like this drink is disgusting. Can't take it. And I remember kind of like pouring it out into a plant. Probably killed the plant. I felt bad later, but it took me like a little time to realize that it wasn't the Jack Daniels that I didn't like. It was the Coca-Cola, and to this day I still can't really drink cocktails with Coca-Cola in them, whether it's rum or it's whiskey. But it was one of those things where I really realized, oh my God, I actually like whiskey. The same thing happened with gin, where I hated tonic water. My grandmother would always drink it, and it was always the cheap stuff because that was what was available from supermarkets. And I realized, wow, if I had gin without the tonic, I like it. This is amazing. Where, anything, and to this day, it's still, I can't really take anything with Coca-Cola or tonic in it. Although I did write a story down in Mexico a couple of months, I guess in the fall, and I had a batanga in that bar where it's supposedly invented or popularized. Yeah, and I didn't want it. I ordered a Paloma, had a Paloma, and then another round was like Paloma again, and the bartender just made me a batanga, and which is Coca-Cola and lime juice and tequila, and I had to drink it. As one of those things where it's like, actually, this is pretty tasty. So maybe I should go back to Jack Daniels and Coca-Cola, 30 years later, or whatever it is, like 20 years later.
Greg in Paris points out people have a great way of being observant to see the backgrounds on these shots. And Noah, he's pointing out those mixtures behind you.
Oh, yeah.
What's the story on those?
One is a 20-year-old, which I got probably almost 10 years ago, and then a 10-year-old rye, and then it's next to the Russell Reserve. It's the original one that they put out the first time they thought Jimmy Russell was going to retire, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like Eddie, make something nice for him." I have one of those bottles. It was like $30. It was the first Russell's Reserve, and I had two, and it was unbelievably good. I drank a bottle and a half of it, and I was like, "Oh, maybe I should put the other bottle away." And then a couple of years ago, they released the remaining stock, but instead of $30, I think it's $600 or $700 was the suggested retail price. So. But it's still delicious. I mean, it's really unbelievable stuff. Jack Rose had some bottles of the original release that they were selling not for very much per glass. Like the last time I was there, $15, $20 or something.
I mean, I used to regularly mix drinks with that stuff.
Man, hell of a good
back
drink.
Back in the day, and boy, I wish I had one of those bottles.
Well, it was pretty funny. It was like Jimmy had been inducted, I think, to the Hall of Fame for Whiskey Advocate that year, and they were like totally grooming him to like retire, and that was 02, 03, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And, I don't think and then like a few years later, they really thought he was going to retire, and they put out another like special edition, and I have a coin somewhere for him, and he just kept being like, "Great, thanks, like thank you, like I'll be here next year, like I'll see you."
Those original tall bottles of it when it was just in like a regular bottle.
Oh yeah,
that stuff was so good.
It really is. I could dig it out. I do the Mild Davis on you when I hunt for it, but there's a half a bottle somewhere back there.
We have a great comment from Angelo, our buddy just down the street from here in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. There is no statute of limitations when it comes to kids and their parents.
That's the truth.
Hey, Angelo, miss you.
And Klaus was going, wow, Ardbeg 17, Joanne, and Christoph, what a way to start with Scotch.
Yeah.
I got to admit, that's and we also had a great comment from Stefan. Irish coffee is healthy. It holds the 4 essential food categories: caffeine, alcohol, sugar, and fat.
If they could just put bacon in it, we'd be all set.
Essential food group. And so we get a smart alecky comment.
Fat wash it, yeah.
And our great smart alecky comment of the night comes from Tyrone Cote up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. All of you have been in production facilities and may know a bit about disinfectant. Is it true that besides death, a possible side effect of ingesting disinfectant is that it may turn?
It's a sad world we live in. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I feel for you guys in America, really.
And moving along.
First whiskey, Jameson, first Scotch, famous grouse, first USA, old granddad.
That's not a bad lineup.
And law school drunk, at least no one started with Loch Dew or Fishkey.
True. I'm sure somebody did start with Loch Dew.
All of you.
Some people.
Yeah, Laddie, the whiskey nerd. As a relative novice, which dram would you advise for a unique flavor and aroma experience? What's a good starter whiskey?
Well, you see, it's funny because we've had two people in the panel here saying that their first whiskey that turned them onto whiskey was Ardbeg and Lafroig, and my first whiskey was Talisker. So I think jump in, guys. You will already know your own palate because you'll be drinking beer or wine or whatever. So you find a whiskey that kind of suits your flavor preferences. If you like lighter flavors, then go for a lighter style of whiskey, and hopefully you can be guided through that. I think this whole idea of the beginner's whiskey has to be a light one has been proved so many times.
Joanne, your thoughts?
I have a completely different mindset. I can't imagine anybody walking up to me and saying, "So what vegetable should I try next?" So I try to match a whiskey to a person and not a person to a whiskey, kind of like what Dave said. If somebody said to me like, "Okay, my dad likes whiskey and I want to buy him something," and I'm like, "Okay, well, what does he have in his cabinet right now, or what does he like? Does he like red wine? Does he like coffee? Does he like chocolate?" I start asking questions to suit the personality of the person versus me just all of a sudden blurting out something that I think someone might like. That's my mindset.
And also,
I agree.
how do you drink it? You know, because
Right.
I think we're so used to kind of going, well, you like whiskey? Well, you're interested in whiskey? You can pour them a glass of neat whiskey and go, right, drink this. It's 50%, and you watch them running out the door. So
I mean, as a drinker of American whiskey, I will say, ice is very, very good in whiskey. You know, if you want to learn to drink whiskey, put some ice in it and just sit there and sip it. You know, American whiskey laughs at ice, and so it's fine.
And also,
and don't forget blends.
Yeah, and ginger ale too. I mean, the number one account for Jameson for 3 or 4 years in a row was the local in Minneapolis, right in Hennepin Mall, and their big drink was called the Big Ginger, and it was a pint glass with a squeeze of lemon, a squeeze of lime, Jameson ginger ale. I mean, that's a pretty easy, and that's Jameson has sold millions of cases on that. I mean, I do think that like drinking is kind of like eating chocolate, right? I once asked, I was sitting next to like the CEO of Godiva USA. I said, "What's the most popular chocolate in America?" And he said, "Well, most people start with milk chocolate. The more they eat, the darker they go, right?" And somebody like my sister is at like 95% cacao bar, right? I'm not there, God knows. And I kind of think that's sort of the way with whiskey too, where people often, we see a lot of people come in with Maker's Mark, the wheated bourbons or some of the lighter, malts, and as they drink more, their palates develop. They go from bourbon to rye, they go from the Glenlivets, the Glenfiddichs, finally, to Islay, I once got into a fight with the bartender at Proof in Louisville in 21C because somebody came in and said, "I've never had whiskey before, give me whiskey." And he pulled out some Art Talisker as a joke. And I was like, "No, you can't give them that. Like, come on," and we were going back and forth, but he did it anyway.
We have a great question.
It might have worked.
I'm sorry, Nichole, go ahead. What would you recommend? You've tasted a few in your life. What would you recommend?
If it's somebody who's starting up with the club, usually it's like, let me give you samples and let me give you samples of a range of everything and figure out what you like. I don't want to tell you should drink this or you shouldn't drink this. You need to figure out your palate, and it's exploration. And the beauty of having a club is we can go and pull between some of the main members and say, okay, what do you got? And we can create a cool sample pack and say, okay, go have fun and explore. If I'm out in a restaurant setting, it's let me order a couple drinks. You try what I'm ordering. See what you like. Figure out what you like from what I'm drinking, and then you can find a path and start exploring it.
Great. We have a good question from Chris Ratcliffe. If we're tying whiskeys to memories and visiting specific distilleries and scenes, how do you form those connections to blends? And at what point does the blarney of some companies' PR overwhelm the whiskey? Interesting question. How do you build that connection to a blend when you don't have a specific place to tie it to?
Well, you could tie it to experiences.
But there are places.
I think that's to places in your life. I think of drinking Jameson blended, or even especially Powers, which is a blend of drinking, that in that's my New York City dive bar whiskey par excellence. And I can think of so many great bars where I've sat there with a pint and a Powers in front of me. And, that just really is almost identity to me. That's the beating heart of New York right there. Listening to the people talking around me and talking to the bartender and sipping on my Powers and my pint and making all that small talk. And, I miss it just absolutely fiercely. Not being able to do that is just killing me.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, it's about occasion. It's about, you can have memories with blends, the advantage of single malt is it comes from a specific place, and, but blends are about universality. They're about occasions. They're about people in a different way.
They're drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
I mean, for everyday, ordinary, sitting at the bar, just talking with people, whiskey.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Not to sound cliched, but for me, blends are very much like era specific. Maybe maybe I'm not saying that properly, but it's like it for me personally, blends are very much about what whiskey's been about for so much longer than single malts. And so the memories that I have of blends, or the way that I enjoy blends, it's not specifically about a place in particular, but it's more about the whole history and the era of blends, which I absolutely love.
We're getting a bunch of great questions and great comments over in here. And one of the questions, let's just knock this one out real quickly. Apologies if this hasn't been mentioned yet, but when is the Amber Light going to be generally available somewhere, Dave? And Adam Hart, your colleague who directed the movie, is in the chat room, so maybe Dave can answer this, or Adam can answer this in the chat room. But when are we going to see the Amber Light online somewhere?
You will have to talk to Adam about that. Yes, there was a limited American screen release scheduled, and then this happened. So that's been put on hold. Yes, it's out in Germany. It's going to be out in Germany on DVD quite soon. And yes, we are exploring online opportunity at the moment. But yeah, you'd have to ask Adam.
And Adam says, "Don't ask me."
That's the official word right there.
That's great. You know, I have such,
a quick comment from Christoph Golderack. Whose kids are we hearing in the background?
Probably mine.
Okay, not a problem. Just wanted to make sure, because I know that Johanne's granddaughter is self-isolating with mom and dad right now, so you've got quiet time.
I was terrified one of my cats was going to walk across the screen, but so far we're doing great here. I have no idea where they are. They're totally ignoring me, so I'm happy.
I got an alert to expect dogs barking a few minutes ago, and it didn't happen, so I'm happy about that at this end. And I think that's my ride. Car coming.
What's going on?
Dave, they're coming for you.
What blends did you drink as teenagers? Hopefully not the same as I did. What whiskeys did you guys drink as teenagers?
Walker Red.
Grouse and Black and White, but not at the same time.
Clan McGregor.
Canadian Royal Reserve. Don't tell my mom.
Famous grouse.
Yeah, and I still drink Grouse. You know.
Yeah.
So, David, I want to ask you about the things you've been doing on Twitter. The lo-fi lush. Explain this thing, because a multi-threaded Twitter feed where you walk people through making cocktails.
Okay. The way this came about is, it's almost like 6 weeks ago when we had to all lock ourselves in. I wanted to make myself a drink, and I realized that a lot of people are locked up at home, and many of these people are people I've seen in bars, my fellow barflies, and they might have some booze at home, but they just really aren't mixing drinks or aren't used to it. So I said, let me walk people through a couple simple drinks, and I did it one day, and it got a good reaction, and I gave it a rest. Then I did it another day.
And David's Wi-Fi connection, as he said earlier, is a bit on the wonky side here. It appears to have cut out the pictures.
A master storyteller. We're all hanging on every word.
When it is also lo-fi lush time right now, so Dave might have left us to make drinks. So,
you want to fill in, Noah? Tell us about Life Behind Bars.
Yeah, sure. So Dave and I co-host the podcast Life Behind Bars. A couple of years now. We won the first Tales of the Cocktail Spirited Award for podcast.
Thanks for reminding me of that.
Sorry about that. WhiskyCast was also a finalist that year. It was a stiff crowd.
It was well deserved.
And that, I guess it was 2 years ago. And Dave and I usually try to put them out about every 2 episodes every month. Obviously, the last few weeks have been a little odd, but we talk about sort of the world's greatest bars and bartenders, and some of the episodes are specific drinks, sometimes specific cities. Try to keep it a lot of fun, make it entertaining. The last episode that we dropped, I guess about 9 days ago, one of our other columnists, Wayne Curtis, came on to talk about kind of the modern birth of Bourbon Street, the guy who created a lot of the bars that created or popularized the hand grenade and the shark attack and stuff, had passed away in December, not of coronas, but of natural causes. And really fun episode. I think I got a laugh listening to it again, which I definitely needed when I was right before we put it live. But it's Dave and I. It's, as my mom says, it's really hard work for you and Dave to sit there and talk for 30 minutes, and it's it's a lot of fun, and hopefully other folks think so too.
We are still waiting for David to connect back in. So,
well, I can say for his Lo-Fi Flush, we're going to soon have an archive of all the drinks on the Beast, so on Half Full, so people can go there. Daily Beast is also rolling out a series called Bartenders at Home. There's so many bartenders around the country who have been laid off or furloughed that we've sort of put them to work, paying them to create videos, making cocktails at their home bars, as we say, from their home bars to your home bars. So we launched that last week, and we'll be rolling out hopefully 100 of those videos. So, from bartenders all over. So it's, hopefully the first of multiple initiatives to kind of put some of these bartenders back to work for us, and get some great cocktails and great content out there.
I have to say your podcast about whiskey snobbery was one of my favorites. Loved it. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. It terrifies me to think that people actually listen to it. That's or people are like, oh, I listen to it when I run or in like the shower. It seems so intimate that Dave and I would be in their ear when they're in the shower, and it's like.
And David has rejoined.
Yeah.
Did you have
just at that moment, Dave?
I
was saying, oh,
I know he's not.
David.
Oh no!
Oh, there it goes again.
Oh, here we are.
No.
And we're getting that wonderful 3 frames per second slow scan video here. So he just disconnected again. So we'll come back to him when he gets a chance here. At what point, and I'm asking this as a hypothetical question, but at what point do we get to the area where we have too much whiskey media out there? And I'm not saying this in regards to any specific outlets or anything, but at what point do we become oversaturated? And David's trying to rejoin us again. Are you there, David?
I'm trying to. It's really not working. My Wi-Fi is cutting out. So I'm going to say goodbye to you all, and thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, David, and we'll talk to you again soon. I really appreciate the time, and you can find the Lo-Fi Lush event content on Twitter, right?
Twitter every night.
Oh, so we'll talk to you later, David.
Cheers, all.
Thank you, David. Take care.
Yep.
So let's get back to this. What point do we have too much?
Dave escaped the hard question. I'm also
saturated, and at what point do we start to see a shakeout in the whiskey media coverage, in the whiskey media that's out there?
I mean, I think we've already seen a slowdown in the number of books being put out, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. I mean, for a while there, when I started writing about cocktails and spirits 20 years ago, give or take, you go to Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, there was one shelf of books, right? Most of them had been written by Michael Jackson or Gary Regan or, Anthony Dias Blue, where they'd be like, 10,000 cocktails to know before you die. That was it. And now you go to Barnes & Noble or bookstore, it could be literally 4 bookshelves just full of books, which, which does seem a little bit of overkill. And sometimes some of the books, that are so wonderful that are out there, it's like, I don't think we need another person to write that book over and over and over again. So I think we've already seen publishers kind of pull back on the books. And, they're still publishing books that are really cool and interesting and unique. And we also see, a lot of, I think we've seen some of the publications also disappear, just because it is a lot of fun, but it's also hard. I mean, the amount of knowledge that somebody like Mr. Broom has in that brain of his, I mean, is I mean, that's decades of real hard work. I mean, it's not all fun. So I think as people kind of realize, you know, like, oh yeah, like I have to put out another podcast. I mean, how many years have you been doing WhiskyCast? This is what, like
Almost 15 years now.
right. And how many episodes? It's
815.
right. I mean, to put out 815 episodes of any podcast on any topic is an extraordinary achievement. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, even if it was the worst podcast on whiskey, just to keep doing it over and over 815 times. I mean, you couldn't do it. I mean, it's just
you're kidding about that part.
No, of course, no. But I mean, but that's what I mean. But it's not like, and to do it high quality the way that you do it, that's a lot of time editing and going around the world and doing all the hard stuff that nobody sees that you do. I mean, that's a huge commitment. I mean, so I think sometimes people get into us and they think, okay, this is gonna be a lot of fun, and then they realize, oh yeah, like being Mark Gillespie is actually a lot of work. Like it's hard work. I mean, it's not for everybody. I mean, that's okay. I mean, that's okay.
Stubbornness, but I mean, Dave, and it probably is not fair to ask you about this, but you were part of ScotchWhiskey.com that may it rest in peace after really good work. But
I can certainly do with the income now.
Really good work. But I mean, Sukhinder and Raj Singh couldn't make it work financially.
No, and I think that was that was the real. That was the alarming thing about it, you know, because it was a good site, the resources were good, the quality was good, the industry loved it, but the industry didn't want to advertise in it because the models of advertising have shifted from print media or even online media into, I don't know, influencers or more online and more direct marketing. You know, that whole model has shifted. So, you know, when you're talking about whiskey media, I would differentiate between paid writing and then people who are whiskey lovers who are doing amazing podcasts or blogs or whatever. And I think there's a real, it's extremely worrying to see the dearth of information that's out there in terms of the paid media. So I'm quite worried about it in that respect. And also what I'm worried about is the kind of dumbing down of everything. The fact that long-form journalism doesn't seem to exist anymore. That talking about whiskey appears to be just doing tasting notes or just shouting opinions rather than doing analysis. And actually sitting back and listening and asking why and being kind of a journalist about things, which it sounds kind of depressing. But I think one thing about this crap that we're going through at the moment is it's a chance to kind of step back and go, well, what do people actually want to read? And have we been going about this in the wrong way? Has this become a bit too formulaic and a bit too calcified? And should we be writing about bigger issues as well as the fun issues? Because big issues can be fun issues. But yeah, I'm pretty worried about it to be perfectly honest, because it's tough to make. It's always been tough to be a writer. You know, you don't get into this gig to make money. You do it because you love it, and it's kind of maybe the only thing you know how to do. But it's getting tougher and tougher to make ends meet.
And especially when when part of your business is based on traveling and doing events and doing tastings, and all that dried up too.
I mean, it will come good, but you know, and I'm not moaning because I'm in a good position. You know, I'm safe. I've got a nice house, family, blah blah blah. But you know, this was going to be a really busy year for me, and my diary is completely empty now for the rest of the year. And bar Noah and writing stuff for Noah, thank you very much, Noah. That's it.
Pleasure to have you.
You know, that is it. So yeah, and that is the reality for all my friends in the media over here as well. and it's not as severe as bartenders and bar owners and restaurant owners and people working in all manner of industry. But that is the fact, that at some point in the next few months, I honestly don't know what I'm going to be doing.
I'm going to dare to pull the Band-Aid right off of this or be the white elephant in the room. From a blogging perspective, it's really difficult to watch from the sideline, because I started out as a blogger, but I also get every once in a while I'll pick up a piece here and there in a magazine or an online course, or I'll write an article or whatever, and it's so easy. I could see and this could get me in trouble by saying this, which doesn't scare me because I don't mind getting in trouble every once in a while, but it's so easy for marketers and for companies to just throw stuff at bloggers because they don't necessarily have to pay bloggers, right? And the biggest thing or the biggest joke is you'll get exposure. People die from exposure, especially in Canada. So it's a rough line to be on, because as a blogger, I don't blog as often as I used to because I just don't feel like there's added value anymore. Everybody's throwing out their tasting notes and everybody is doing it for free. So I'm thankful I have a full-time job doing something else for a living, and that I get, a writing gig every once in a while that pays a little bit of money. I write a rant for somebody, or I write an article for a newbie, or I can't even begin to imagine. One of my very good mentors is Davin, and Davin and I, just chatted recently on a virtual tasting at how difficult it has been, especially through COVID, to get his latest book out there. And it's a great book, but if you have no way to get it out there to people, and I can't even imagine, how this is affecting people who are trying to make a living at this. And again, I'll probably get in trouble and get a whole bunch of stuff from people, but
I'll tell you, I started up a website recently, and it's good because and it's fun. I can post some stuff up there, but I ain't getting paid for it.
Well, it's kind of like the old days, right? It's like when you started out, Dave and Mark. Nobody wanted to pay us for whiskey stuff then.
Yeah.
Nobody.
And that's kind of a point, Noah, which is we've got to be clever about this. We've got to start being cute about it, and we can no longer just go, well, it'll come. We've got to go out and look for it and actually find the new angles and almost kind of reinvent it.
And that's why I was always,
from a professional point of view, and look at it in a new way. And for me, that's exciting. I'm not miserable about this.
Right.
I'm actually quite excited about it.
That's what always impressed me about both you and Mark. Whiskey Cask. It was a time when the podcast wasn't a thing. Like nobody, and even if you had said like, I'm going to do a whiskey podcast, most people were like, okay, like why? Like what? I don't get it. And even with you, with all the manual books and all the different books, and it took a lot. I think we forget that how, back in the day, I remember I was so jealous of Dave Wondrich because he got a third of a page in Esquire. And like as of the time when you can only write about whiskey for Father's Day, the holidays. Kentucky Derby, I think part of the reason why it became so big in America was because whiskey writers were so desperate to write about bourbon that we were like bothering all of our editors to let us write about the Kentucky Derby. St. Patrick's Day, the same thing, Cinco de Mayo. All these holidays that we pushed and pushed and pushed because it was the only chance that we could do to get to writing. And things like Whiskey Cast or all the books that you were doing, Dave, back in the day, now it seems like a great idea that like, yeah, of course, like start a whiskey podcast so many years ago. But at the time, that was a pretty risky move, Mark. That was pretty, it was pretty, far thinking on your end that, because at the time, it didn't seem like anybody would be interested in any of the stuff that we cared about.
You want the actual honest to God truth about being started?
Yeah.
Back in the summer of 2005, I was thinking about podcasts, and I posted a question back in the old Whiskey Magazine message boards.
Message boards, amazing.
And I said, if I produced a whiskey podcast, would you guys listen to it?
Yeah.
17 responses. 1 said yes. 2 said maybe. And the other 14 said, what's a podcast?
This is what I'm saying. I mean, when you did it, that you were so ahead of the curve that people didn't even.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
I mean,
it's right. I mean,
5 months later, I went ahead and started it.
right. I mean, which now seems like a genius move, but at the time, it took a lot of courage to do. I mean, it's kind of like now. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff. It's going to take kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. It's got a thinking outside the box, thinking about maybe new platforms, new ways to tell stories, whether it's podcasts, that whatever the new way is. And out of this, hopefully, we'll see some awesome stuff, like in the next 5 to 10 years, where they saw an opportunity and they ran with it. And hopefully, we'll see some other cool stuff, and hopefully, people will still want all the old stuff that we're producing.
I disagree with there's a comment that's just come up there from Michael there. James Joyce would never blog Ulysses. Yes, he would.
I mean,
Yes, he would. He would so definitely do Finnegan's Wake on Twitter. Yeah.
As he was publishing it to raise money, he was selling off pieces to be published, right? I mean, that's kind of the original Twitter feed. I don't know. But,
and as well, John points out, I loved those message boards. Those were fun back in the day because there was a beginning of the whiskey fabric back then, and it was sort of starting out, but it really hadn't quite gotten taken off yet. But,
no, yeah.
So we've talked about good whiskeys and things like that. So I'll just throw one fun one out. What's the worst whiskey you've ever tried? And I want to Nichole on this one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Go ahead, Nichole.
I'm trying to think of a worse whiskey.
I mean,
I don't have anything right at the top of my head here. Let someone else go.
I've one that it's maybe it was experimental, right? Like Buffalo Trace is known for their experimental line.
Yeah.
And they had found a tree from Mongolian oak. It was the most expensive barrel they ever made because there aren't that many oak trees in Mongolia. And they made like one barrel. And that was really, really funky. It was one that I was like, I want to try. I have to try it. But then they were like, do you want more? It's like, no, I'm good. Yeah. Just give me some regular Buffalo Trace. I'm all right.
There comes to mind there where Mongolian is the first word and I can't say the second word. But
I won't mention the distillery because it was it no longer exists. But my tasting was the aroma is like a baby vomiting into a heavily chlorinated swimming pool.
Oh.
Yep.
So yeah, that and a whiskey made in the Champagne region, which I still actually have some of, and I use it in training sessions to show how many faults can exist within whiskey, and also to prove that people in Champagne should probably stick to making wine.
You told me that you liked my whiskey, Dave. I can't believe. So disappointed.
Mark and I actually started. We tasted a really bad whiskey at the New Brunswick Whiskey Festival.
Yeah.
Courtesy of Larry Onions from the Whiskey Montreal area.
It wasn't that bad.
Oh, it was horrific.
It was bad, but it wasn't that bad.
It was horrific. I don't spit out whiskey very often. It did not go down. It was somewhere between fish, diesel, and a hockey bag. It was bad. Really, really bad. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, so they do exist.
I cannot find the bottle. It's back here somewhere within arm's reach, but I can't quite find it. But the one that I scored the worst ever was the infamous Pabst Blue Ribbon whiskey from last year.
Oh, yeah.
They matured
I never
for
tasted it.
5 seconds.
I just got bad goosebumps.
They matured it for 5 seconds because they basically let the spirit safe pour out over oak staves.
Ooh.
And the baby vomit thing comes to mind on that one because that's
Excellent.
euphoric.
Love a bit butyric. Yeah.
The tasting note was, oh God, make it stop. Let's see, Dave, question for you from Scotch now. Has your exposure to Westland changed your view on barley's impact on flavor? We were at Westland a few weeks ago for the...
I think it's helped refine it. I always felt that Golden Promise had a significant impact in terms of flavor, but I think what the guys at Westland have done is move that on into a completely different sphere and opening up just such fascinating new areas about flavor and about agriculture and cereal breeding and heritage varieties, etc., etc. Yeah, I mean they're extraordinary guys. So you know, from just Golden Promise was different. Suddenly it's boom. It's an extraordinary new field in so many ways.
We've had a couple of comments, including one from our pal David Blackmore at Glenmorangie about the Pabst Blue Ribbon whiskey being worse than Fishkey. Yes, it was. Not even close. Pabst Blue.
Mark?
Yes. Go ahead.
I have a question actually for the panel. I'm in a book club with Davin and we're reading his Canadian whiskey, and we come up as to why Canadian whiskey doesn't sit in the market the same way Scotch or American whiskey is. I'm curious what the panel thinks as to why that is.
Great question. Go ahead, guys.
Okay. I think there's kind of two reasons. One is the inherent modesty of Canadian people, and also I think the financial model for Canadian whiskey for a very long time was large distilleries producing large volumes to sell to the American market. So they sold cheap, and they sold cheap for too long. And I think somewhere along the line, the distillers almost didn't believe in the quality of the whiskey that they made. But that is changing. I've been seeing for a few years now, and it's really, again, thanks to Davin for taking me over to Canada and going around lots of distilleries and looking at what is there. And it's almost like a confidence thing, to be honest. An over-reliance on the American market, but also this confidence thing, which very much reminds me of what Japan was like in the 1990s. It was the Japanese distillers were almost apologetic and going, well, our whiskey isn't as good as yours in Scotland, but, please try it if you want. And there was this, I think that somewhere in the marketing side, distillers knew they were making good whiskies, but somewhere in the marketing side, it was, well, we can just get the money in, we can keep the money coming in. And well, actually, because we've been selling this for so long, we can't compete at that particular level. So that was the case. And I think that's changing now, thank God, because there's some extraordinary whiskey getting in Canada.
Good question from Tor Christensen. How many Canadian distilleries are there? There's about 200 last check. I think that more than 200 now that are in Davin's new book with Blair Phillips distilleries, but not all of them are making whiskeys. Some of them are just making gins and vodkas right now. And Brian Farkas points out for the past 75 years, Canadian versus American has been similar to Irish versus Scotch. That's a good analogy, I would think.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. You've also got to remember that until, I know it will probably pull me up on this, or Jan, you'll pull me up on this, but I think until maybe the past decade or maybe 15 years, there's more Canadian whiskey was still the number one whiskey style being sold in America.
So
it's only in very, very recent times that bourbon actually overtook Canadian whiskey in terms of volume in the States. So it's not quite like Scotch and Irish, really.
Joanne, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, from my perspective, I think, so my very first whiskey was actually a Canadian whiskey, which shouldn't come as a surprise because I'm Canadian. But I think John Hall changed the face of Canadian whiskey. And when that happened, it caused this massive tsunami across the rest of the world. It took a long time before you could get Canadian or anything but Canadian Club or Crown. Not that there's anything wrong with those brands. They're lovely brands. But when you look at everything else that's available right now, Pike Creek, Lot 40 Creek, Stock and Barrel. I have some of them behind me right now. 1/3 of my whiskey collection is Canadian whiskeys. There are so many beautiful Canadian single malts coming out right now from the Yukon, from
Brewers.
Canada.
Two Brewers is
Oh, it's great.
anybody's whiskey.
It's beautiful.
What-
I can name something from every single province that is making a whiskey right now across Canada. And I was a huge advocate of sending out samples to people who would say, Canadian whiskey is crap. And I'd say, really? Let me send you 5 samples. And I would literally put them in the mail, send them out to people, prove how beautiful Canadian whiskey actually is.
Well, and one of the things that really kind of upended the reputation, you know, and all of the, you know, the falsehoods and about Canadian whiskey was really Dave Pickerel and also Rob Cooper went up to that distillery in Alberta and bought straight rye. Dave Pickerel, that went into Whiskey Pig, that went into a lot of his projects. Rob Cooper had it for Lock, Stock, and Barrel, right? And it was one of these things where it wasn't marketed as Canadian whiskey, but it was amazing rye. He and Alan Katz were probably the first people who ever talked to me about why straight rye whiskey was worth drinking or saving or even what the hell it was. And that kind of idea, when it kind of like, there's one of these things like, oh, you like this? Guess what? It's made in Canada. And people's minds were like blown, like, wow, like the best craft, some of the best craft American whiskeys are actually made in Canada? Like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah. And for a while, it's kind of like they didn't say anything. And then it would sort of went on the back label, and then it was on the front label. And finally it was kind of accepted, like, oh, okay, cool. And now we live in a generation where drinkers now coming of age, they don't think of Canadian whiskey as being second rate. They don't think of tequila as coming with a worm or in a plastic bottle. I mean, like all of the myths that we've spent our careers trying to fight and upend, we've been successful, right? I mean, it's like people think, oh yeah, there's great stuff from Canada now. Like none of the stuff that you would hear in bars, hopefully, do you really hear anymore? I mean, thank God some of those things have just disappeared.
I just wish we saw more of it over here. You know, it's you know, I don't get there's a lot of thirsty people in America, but I always say to Canadian friends, you know, remember, you know, there's a world out there.
We had another question from Christoph Kolderak on Canadian whiskey. We often see old vintages of Canadian Club on auctions. Is that good? Yeah, the bottle's in good shape. Yeah, it would be good.
Yeah, why not?
I've had some really, really fantastic old Canadian clubs.
Me too. I have a couple from the 1960s and 70s. You would not. They're unbelievable. They're gorgeous whiskeys.
Wow.
And one from Charles Epperson. I have an unopened Crown Royal bottled in 1959, received from a dear friend. Do you think it's still good? Charles, send it to me. I'll tell you. Okay?
That's the only way to tell.
Send it to me, and I'll tell you if it's good.
Yeah.
I may not send it back. Yeah,
Totally.
I'm betting it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And more comments down here. And Bill Ricker points out it is harder to find the better, smaller Canadian single malts down here in the US of A. Yes, it is, but they're working on that. Gordon Homer in the UK sent us the Lot 40 Cask-Strength.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Well said, Gordon.
Bull Barley says Canadians like myself started as poor young people who only drank 5-star, and we've got that horrific taste stuck in our taste bud memories. 5-star, I think, that was made in Gimli, right?
Yes.
Which is where Crown Royal is made now, but 5-star, I think you can still get in parts of Canada. And Blackmore says he's drinking a 1982 bottle of Canadian Club right now.
Show off.
Straw.
Wait a second. Talk about show-offs. No, you're the one with your own special.
I think there's some good stuff behind you too. One day I want to check out what's in all those cases.
We'll have to do that sometime.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we've gone an hour and a half right now, and thank you
Wow.
for doing this.
Cheers.
I hope you guys had fun doing this, and thank
Really
you.
enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Cheers to all of you guys.
Stand by
Stay
for
safe.
here while I say goodbye to everybody on the webcast. And I want to thank all of you again for watching. And don't forget to join us on our next webcast. We'll be coming up on Wednesday, 9th of April. And our guests will include Louise McWayne from Chapelgate Whiskey Company, Michael Henry, the master blender from Loch Lomond Distilleries in Scotland, Paul Hletko from Fuse Spirits in Chicago, or Evanston, Illinois, to be more specific, and Kaveh Zamanian from the Rabbit Hole Distillery in Louisville. That'll be coming up Wednesday, the 29th at 5 p.m. New York time. And until then, until we meet again, I hope that you have a wonderful, safe, healthy week. Stay safe, stay home, enjoy your drams responsibly, and we will talk again soon. I'll see you on Wednesday. And don't forget to join us for the podcast this weekend. We will have Bill Thomas from the Jack Rose Dining Spoon in Washington on the podcast. We'll also talk with Meredith Meyer-Grelly of Wiggle Distillery in Pittsburgh. We'll be talking with him about how the coronavirus has affected the small businesses in the hospitality and distilling industry in ways that you might not have expected. Once again, until we meet on Wednesday or whenever you listen to the podcast, I'm Mark Gillespie. Have a great weekend. Be safe, everyone.